Welcome back to our podcast. My name is Trinice, and we have, of course, our founder, Sean Smith. We also have Deputy Chief Hamilton, and then we have our social media specialist, Darren.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast this week. And let me just throw that in. We have Deputy Chief Hamilton from the Cobb County Police Department with
Yes,
us
sir.
today. And we're going to be having State Representative Park Cannon join us in a few minutes here. But welcome to the podcast, Deputy Chief Hamilton.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I
Thank you
just
for having
just
me.
so you know, you have made it to like the spot where we've had DA Brody, we've had Deputy
Judge
Chief
Angela. Oh, yeah.
Deputy Chief
Uh,
from Gwinnett County.
Herbert. ADA Herbert.
ADA Herbert. We've had just last week. We had Judge Angela Brown from which I know you know very well.
We also had Colonel Atkins as well
Yes.
from the
We
Sheriff's
have
Department.
had in that same chair too.
Absolutely.
I tell you, I'm following some big footsteps.
And Bishop Ramon, I think, sat in that same
Yep.
chair. So we want to Deputy Chief Hamilton. Yeah, we want to just welcome you to the podcast today. Some of the things that we want to talk about, starting off talking about, is about Cobb County Police Department. Where are you guys at like now? What are you guys doing to engage in the community? Because as you know, like this last year has been crazy
Yes.
between the community and law enforcement, right? What is some of the things that the Cobb County Police Department are doing, even during COVID, to reach out to the community?
Well, and it's interesting you brought that up about COVID. COVID definitely put a stop on life.
Yeah.
It seems like this past year. But I will say though, our department, we have a community affairs unit, and what these young ladies and young men do, they're kind of, for lack of a better word, they're liaisons between the citizens and the police department. So we have 5 precincts in Cobb County. You have Precinct 1, which is North Cobb, Precinct 2, which is South Cobb, down in Austell, Mableton area. Then you have Precinct 3, which is the Vinings, and then you have Precinct 4, which is East Cobb, and then you have Precinct 5, which is West Cobb. So each one of those precincts has a community affairs unit or a person assigned to their particular precinct. So let's say, for instance, down in Mableton, if Pastor wants to have an event at his restaurant, and he wants the community to come, he can get with whatever our community officer's name is there, and they can set up some kind of, a thing where the officers will come by. Because I can tell you how much Pastor has fed those police officers down there a lot,
Right.
in his restaurant. So really, it's kind of like the go-between. And these men and women, they have done countless of things. They get with the schools in those particular districts. They set up events with the schools. They'll also go into HOAs. They set up neighborhood watches. They'll go and talk about elder abuse or any kind of crime prevention, things of that nature. So they do a lot of things out in the community. We also have our PAL program, which is under my purview, the Police Athletic League, if you know anything about that. I know the city of Atlanta has. I think this originated out of the city of New York many, many, many years ago. But we've had a PAL program since about 2011.
Oh wow!
And it's made up of we have PAL track team, football, basketball, baseball,
You
soccer.
on any one of those teams?
Am I what?
On any one of those teams?
No, I helped. Now I did play college football, so I'm able to help out with the football camp.
Yeah.
So that's in my wheelhouse. But everything else, no. Actually, our PAL track team has competed in national amateur track meets.
Oh, wow.
We actually, I think we placed in the top 20 in 9 events.
Wow.
Over the last several years. So the track team is off the chain. So we have the track, we have the PAL, and just on a side note, the officers on the streets, I could tell you, I could give you countless of lists on where you got officers that have actually came up on particular situations where they've reached out in their own pockets and paid for people to stay in hotel rooms, or if you had homeless people that they've set up in hotels for a couple of nights. Come across families that just didn't have any. Am I still good?
Yeah, he's still good.
So I didn't want to take out the fact. I know we talking about just specific community things, but we have a bunch of officers. I mean, they see you on the side of the road. They change tires. I had one guy. He's a mechanic on the side. This lady broke down on the side of the road. He went down to the Advanced Auto Part, got a part for the car, and worked on it on the side of the road and fixed it and got it going. Those type of things that you don't see the news media is wanting to broadcast. They want to broadcast all the negative. But these are the type of things that my men and women are doing every day that needs to be talked about.
And no lie, I mean, I know that to be a fact. I remember one time I was in a rental car. I was coming down East West Connector, and I'm trying to ride without no gas. I think I can make it. I literally got stopped on East West Connector, like right there where it converts over to Barrett Parkway.
Yes.
And I was stuck in the middle of the road, and the police officers came, and they spent like 30 minutes because we couldn't figure out how to get the car into manual transmission. And once I got into manual, like I'm in the car, and like 2 officers pushed me off on the side of the street. And I stopped. I let go of the manual transmission, so the car just stopped on them. And it was like, oh, my back. And they kept, and we got it back, and they pushed us out. And by the time I got the car, they was gone. But hey, I was off the side of the street. And I tried to offer them something for free. So, okay. But I know that for a fact. And I think that, like you said, it's important that we talk about some of those things, talk about what the county is doing from that perspective. Because we don't hear enough of that. We don't hear enough of what officers are doing. And like, from your opinion, what is it going to take to build a relationship back with the community in law enforcement?
It's going to, I'm going to be honest, it's incumbent upon, I think, more of the police department than citizens. I mean, we got a lot of catching up to do. And traditional policing, it was always, hey, no comment. Or we can't tell you this. We can't tell you. Everything was a secret.
Right.
It was kept behind the blue wall, right? Now, police chiefs and police leadership around the country realize that those days are over. The times of no comment is over. So what's going to happen is, or need to happen, is there got to be more transparency on our side of the house. We got to be able to relinquish those walls, right, and go in and let the people come in. Let them come into our facilities. Let them see what we're doing. You know, we was talking about something similar earlier, is that, you know, we got to be more transparent. And I think once that happens, I think you'll start seeing that gap close up. But on the flip side, citizens have got to allow us to be able to do that. They got to be able to have these tough conversations on both sides. So you come at me with some serious conversation, a question, I'm good with it. But hey, I'm about to come back with you to you for some too. So you got to be.
Yeah, because we just had a real,
real
detailed conversation.
We can debate and talk about it all day, as long as we keep it respectful.
Yeah.
I'm good with it. Yeah. So that's what's going to happen.
So I had a question, Deputy Sheriff. But when I was in Florida, I worked with some police down there that during the marches when everything was going on, and we had set up a community organization committee board. Do y'all have one in Atlanta by chance?
Well, now when you say Atlanta, we just make sure because
I'm not
a lot
from
of
here.
people,
I'm from
I know.
Florida. Yeah, I'm from
So
Florida,
everybody, when everybody say Atlanta, they think about Atlanta Police Department, right? So
okay,
because it's like
Understood.
4,000 police departments.
Exactly.
Huge.
Specifically cops.
Right. So, but yeah, as far as you're talking about like with a citizen review board type thing, no, we do not have one in Cobb County. Now that has come up in several conversations, and I'll just give you my personal opinion on it. I'm not opposed to it, but what I would like to see is that whoever's going to be on that citizen board, they go through some type of training.
Exactly.
Police training. I mean, you can't just put 12 people on a board that's never even been around a police department, and then I expect you to make decision on whether or not my officer did something wrong or not. And you even have no idea what we do.
Exactly.
So there's certain training I would like to see put in place, but I'm not opposed to it at all.
Yeah, and the one we established, we had ex-police and we had military-trained people. They were the head of the board to make sure that it is conducted, like you said, properly. So,
Right. Okay.
Maybe put a good attorney on there or something too.
No, there's definitely you have
That's what I'm
attorneys
thinking
and
about.
you have everybody on.
There's
there.
always an attorney
There's
somewhere,
always
I
an
say.
attorney in any organization. There's going to be one.
Go ahead, Trinice. You had a question for Deputy Chief Hamilton?
Not yet. I have a question, but it's going to be on we're not there yet. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So one of the things too that we've been kind of working on, and I know you're in favor of this, or not in favor per se, is talking about the difference between policy versus what people think, right? Your reality, right? So we can't just be to the point where we're like, okay, this is what should have been done, but the law says something totally different, right? Explain to everybody, just so they have a clear understanding. One of the things that we've been talking about in our meetings is we actually want to get together with pamphlets, explain to people like in the community, what is the rules? What are the laws? When you, like D.A. Brody, one of the things he talked about doing in Cobb County, and the reason why I'm sticking to Cobb County is because you represent Cobb County, right? Is that he talked about going to churches and telling them like, hey, even if you're guilty, this is how you deal with it. And if you're not guilty, this is still how you deal with it, right? Educating the community on what it is that per se he does, right?
Right.
What are some of the things that you think the police department can do to better educate the community on the things that they need to know? So, like, for example, if you're pulled over by a police officer, right? What are some of the things that you should not do? True story. When I first moved here from Florida, I stayed in Cherokee County. I was out at like 2 o'clock in the morning because I wanted some Taco Bell. And a police officer pulled me over because I was waiting on the light. I broke the rule because I just turned and whatever, right? I'm not admitting to that. It was like 8 years ago, so find me, right? But the reality was the police officer pulled me over, and he asked me, and the first question he asked me was like, what's in the bag down there, right? And, natural reaction is that I'm going to reach for the bag, and I'm going to show you what's in the bag. Not the best idea I could have done, right? But at the end of it, me and the officer ended up having a great discussion about gun rights and about gun laws. And we spent like 30 minutes outside talking, right? Mm-hmm. But what are some of the things that you think that the community needs to understand that their role is in helping law enforcement? And explain to them, like, what is law enforcement's job? Your job is to enforce the law. If they have a problem with it, they have to deal with the law, not you.
Right. And I'm probably going to put the state representative on the hot seat later on that very topic, because basically at the end of the day, you just said it. We enforce state law.
Right.
And so if you want to, complain about the laws, then guess what? Go out and vote and then talk to your state legislatures about changing the law. They're the ones that handle actually making laws. One big thing, you kind of mentioned it earlier about traffic stops. I can't tell you, I've been on countless of forums where people have come out and asked me to come speak to their different groups and have their teens come out and say, hey, what is my kid supposed to do if they're pulled over by the police? How they're supposed to respond? And I keep it simple. Don't try your case on the side of the road.
Right.
That's what you got the court systems for, and that's what you got. We have a complaint system. If one of our officers do something wrong, get their name on the side of the road, and they better give it to you because it's in policy. If they refuse to give you the name, then they got to come deal with me. So you get their name, you find out who the supervisors are. Don't ask to have the supervisor come to the scene. We don't have time for that. Get the number, call, and then if you got an actual complaint, file the complaint.
Right.
On the side of the road is not the time to start that yelling and screaming and trying to debate your issue. If you don't feel like you should have got a ticket, guess what? That's what the court is for. So that is one of the big things. And then the attitudes.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, when I used to work the streets, if I pull you over speeding, and you speeding, Sean, you doing 90 in and 45, right? And I come up there and you start, what you stop me for? And all the head rolling and the eyes popping. And why you start? Dude, you already know why I stopped you, right?
Right.
So, but a better response is, sir, I'm sorry, blah, 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 whatever. I'm pretty sharp, man. I'm trying to get to work. I'm late. Man, I'm going to tell you, I can't tell you countless of times I've let people go just because they were straight up and they was nice. All right. They got, and I'm gonna probably tick off some cops by saying this, but there is a POP, pissed off the police ticket.
Right.
Right. Even though I know you were speeding, but if you come with that attitude, you better know you might as well go ahead and get ready to get that fine because you're gonna get it. And that, so that's one of the things I think from the law enforcement perspective is, again, it goes back to the transparency and being willing to come out and teach and show people, hey, look, this is what we expect. All right, so what do you want from us, though?
Yeah.
And then, it's a two-way street.
So I do have a question specifically because we're talking about being able to make complaints and what have you. And since we opened that door, what is the turnaround time for, let's say, a civilian who wants to speak or, contact the supervisor, what have you? What's the turnaround time for that? And for Cobb, is there do they go on the website? How is that something that they can do if our listeners ever want to do something like that?
There's a few different ways you can file a complaint. You can either call it in. You can come to the precinct. And actually ask to speak to a supervisor and file the complaint. You can send an email. You can send it by carrier pigeon if you want to. You don't even have to tell your name. You can call in and be anonymous. We're still gonna investigate. So as far as the turnaround, it just kind of depends on, first of all, how you send it and how you did it.
Yeah.
Because of course, an email is gonna probably take longer than you coming down face to face.
Yeah.
But once that supervisor gets that complaint, you should hear from someone within a 24-hour period.
Okay.
To talk to you to find out, okay, what's going on. And then, of course, you should be kept abreast throughout the process.
Gotcha.
Because it is a process.
Yeah.
It goes from that original complaint, then it'll go to our internal affairs unit.
Yeah.
They'll investigate, and then once they decide, okay, hey, this is what we came, these are the findings, and then it'll come back up the chain of command.
Yeah.
Where everybody's got to look at it and say, okay, yeah, our officer did something wrong, or no, he didn't.
Yeah.
But either way, that you will be contacted as a citizen. You'll be told what the investigation found and what the final status was.
Awesome. Yeah.
So it's a process.
Yeah.
But there's several different avenues you can use.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
So with Cobb County, right? I know that I call it 2020 was like a huge year for Cobb County, right? We had a lot of adjustments from a political standpoint. We got a new chairman of the board. We have a new DA in Cobb County. We have a new sheriff in Cobb County, who I know you used to work with.
Actually, we're best friends. He's the godfather of my youngest daughter. That's how tight we are.
Oh yeah, he's so cool. We had him on. We had a meeting with him, and he's amazing.
Yeah.
Him and who was it, Colonel Atkins?
Absolutely.
From the Cobb Sheriff's Department. They have been absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we spoke to with Sheriff Craig Owens, he made it clear to us too, like, you know, our job at the end of the day is to enforce the law, but at the same time, one of the hardest parts of my job is to go out there and have to evict people, right? Because the Sheriff's Department deals with that, not the police department.
Correct.
The Sheriff's Department gives that. And he was saying that, you know, I'm trying to figure out a plan to where if I have to evict somebody, how do we give them like a gift card rather than not we could put them in a hotel for a night? You mentioned something like that. So the officers, when these officers are doing this, is this something that the Cobb County Police Department has as a program, or are these the officers really just taking their own money?
These are officers doing their own thing.
Wow.
It comes out of their pockets. They don't ask. Sometimes we don't even know about it. The only way we usually find out about it is if that citizen finds out who the officer, and they'll call in and tell us. The men and women, because that's just what they are. That's what they're made of, and they don't think twice about it. So no, it's not a per se mandate or a program. It's just individual officers taking their own time and effort and wanting to do what's right at that particular time.
I think we finally have Representative Park Cannon, who has joined us and somewhat joined us. Representative Park Cannon, can you hear us? She has to unmute her own self. Sorry, Representative Park Cannon, can you hear us now?
Yeah, she has to unmute herself. Hers is on now, you can tell. It's for okay. You had to click it for.
All right, there we go. Hey, you hear us now, Representative Park Cannon?
Absolutely. How are y'all?
We're good. So everybody, just so we know, we have State Representative Park Cannon. What district do you represent, Park Cannon?
58, right?
58 is Midtown, Downtown, and Southwest Atlanta, Georgia.
So you're the fifth. I did some research on you. I know you're definitely Albany, actually, and I was talking about you with all my friends, actually. And I know I'm sorry I'm stealing your time right now, but I'm just so amazed at what you did. And, you know, for you to be, you know, the intersectionality that actually you know, and for you to be so great at your young age. So, yeah.
It's humble upbringing. South Georgia will teach you a lot of things about politics. They still hang us in trees. They still do a lot of racist voting things. So it's just really important, I think, that as a young person, I just stick up for the truth, and voting rights is that main issue right now.
Yes. Oh, and then speaking of such, really quickly, the House passed the House passed and is going to the Senate now, the Equality Act, which is going to protect persons who are of like queer sexuality or different gender identities or what have you. So I know that's not the topic really right now, but I actually want to get your opinion on that.
As an LGBTQ member, you know, as a rainbow community member, I always think it's important when we receive status recognition.
Yeah.
The hate crime bill last year that passed the Georgia House of Representatives, House Bill 426, it actually gave that status recognition to say you actually can't do discriminatory actions towards people in this community, people in different races and religions and of age and different experience. So that was really great. So it's nice actually to see the rest of the country catch up to Georgia.
Yeah.
This Equality Act is going to help. We've had to put forward legislation every year in the state of Georgia to try to address discrimination in the workplace, discrimination in employment, and discrimination in public accommodations for the queer community. And sometimes it looks different. Like sometimes people discriminate differently against a trans person than they do me, you know, someone who they would walk down the street and be like, oh, I wouldn't think that you were a part of the community. Well, it doesn't really matter because the point of me even talking about being a part of the community is because of the rights that we are looking for, not my personal life. No one cares about all that, honey. But we care a lot about actually just getting people what they need. So the federal government, I'm proud of them and at least passing it through the House. And now we'll get to see what the Senate is popping off like.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And speaking of policy, I know Sean actually had a question for you about policy, actually.
So we're going to shift to Georgia, right? Because, you know, I'm a resident of Georgia. I stay in Georgia. One of the policies that you know that we're all fighting against and a lot of nonprofit organizations are fighting against is the new policy they just passed trying to limit us in our right to vote, when we can vote, absentee ballots, how they're going to change the law, the license law. And the reality is, let's be honest, the election was fair. The election was fair by every standard. There was no hacking of the system. Secretary of State, who was a Republican, by the way, just came out and said that this was the most secure election that we've had in our history in the state of Georgia. So what is it that you guys are doing? I know I was on a meeting the other day with the NWWGA or something like that, the women, the Black Congresswomen who are involved, and the NAACP was on there as well. And I know you spoke in the beginning. So what are some of the things that we're doing from a policy standpoint to kind of make sure that this policy does not pass the House or doesn't pass the state and become law?
So the truth is that we've got House Bill 531 coming to the floor of the Georgia House of Representatives in 2 days on Monday morning at 10 a.m. This is after yesterday they passed a bill in the Senate that would stop automatic voter registration, meaning you can no longer go to the DMV in Georgia and register to vote, which is bananas, because 5 million of the 7 million people who are registered to vote in Georgia registered to vote at the DMV. So now that things are working and that people are actually able to, you know, not battle getting COVID-19 and exercising their right to vote, maybe they actually dropped their ballot in the mail. Maybe it was their first time voting by mail. Maybe they actually enjoy putting it in the drop box. Maybe they went and voted early. Why are you attacking all these different types of ways to vote? So that's been interesting to see. Therefore, we have 3 strategies. 1, 20 different statewide groups, including the NAACP and the groups that you listed there, are mobilizing on the Capitol Monday morning at 10 a.m. to make it really clear that we're protecting our right to vote. 2, the Democratic caucus is looking for stories. If you voted by mail, we want to know. If you voted by absentee, we want to know. If you went to the ballot box, stood in line for 12 hours, we want to know. We want to know everyone's experience, because what they'll say is, oh, we're taking away Sunday voting because no one does it. Girl, maybe no one does it in one county in the middle of Georgia, but I know souls to the polls, honey. In Fulton County, DeKalb County, all
County.
this local area, Cobb, you know what I'm talking about? We love souls to the polls. So that's the second thing. And then the third is really just making it clear to your county election officials the importance of them weighing in on this. We've seen the state election board take cases from counties and start investigating them at the state level. These are those claims where people voted twice, or they didn't change their registration, or they think that they lived out of state and they mailed something in. We all know it was no fraud. We've done that over and over through audits. But those are the 3 things that we're doing really to try to get this bill to stop on Monday.
So let me ask you a question. Big question. Why do you feel like the House is going this route? Like, what is the reason for them having such a passion to fix something that's not really broke in Georgia? And not even in Georgia, we can talk about it even across the nation. You know, it's funny because immediately after Secretary Raffensperger came out and was like, you know, there was no fraud in the election, they tried to pass legislation saying, hey, you know what? The people shouldn't decide who should be the Secretary of State. The House should, because we represent the people. What's the big attack on democracy in Georgia?
It's so interesting to think that for the first time, they are actually looking into the voting code for the past few years, the election laws, and they're realizing that there were so many inadequacies, there were so many confusing pieces, and then they started actually just putting conspiracy theories on top of that. So, for example, when in 2005, Georgia Republicans codified no excuse absentee voting, which means you don't have to be a senior citizen in order or disabled to receive your ballot by mail, but you can say, I'm a college student, I'm going out of town, I'm going to request my absentee ballot, and then, I'm going to send it back in. When they started realizing that, now what they're saying is there should be no excuse. Before we were trying to say you could have some excuses, but now there are no excuses. Let's just take that all away, which is so dramatic in this very specific instance because we're still in a pandemic, if as many people know, and we don't have extra money sitting around. We haven't even dipped into our rainy day fund in order to deal with our pandemic. Instead, we've let people go hungry and homeless. And now we feel like, oh, we're so kind that we're willing to spend $32.9 million implementing all of these new changes in House Bill 531 alone, which is not even including the lawsuit. So it's really a priority of funding. If they want to spend their money on this and in lawsuits, we're about to take them to court, just like we did with the abortion ban. We've still been in court for the past 3 years, and they've been paying these attorneys at the Attorney General's office $400 an hour for the past 2 years out of state money. So it's really their fiscal irresponsibilities.
Well, I'm in the wrong business. I need to become an attorney.
I'm on my way to do so.
I know that Deputy Chief Hamilton actually said that he had a question for you earlier that he was going to bring to your attention.
Well, it wasn't a question. It was just a statement because we talked about how, everyone is always jumping on the police as far as the laws and how we try to go out and we explain, look, we just enforce the laws.
Right.
And it's about getting out and voting and then talking to your state representatives and legislators about changing laws. So, so that was what I was saying. But I do need to say one thing, State Representative Cannon. I got to give you a shout out because you're my homegirl. I'm from Albany. I was actually born in Albany, but I was raised in Cordia, Georgia.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So shout out to South Georgia. You probably know my family now. My uncle is Earl Lockett, the Superior Court judge there in Albany.
Very good. You probably know some of my family sitting around in there too, in them rockers and around the community. We need to connect about that because what we've been trying to make it, really clear to all Georgians right now is for the first time in a long time, we all felt like we were voting together, whether you were in South Georgia, North Georgia, wherever you were when we were working on those federal elections. And now what do we do with that momentum? How, if there's a state election board meeting down in Dougherty County where they're trying to remove a Black person from the election board, but they're just trying to do it by saying, oh, we're going to limit the number of board members and the appointments are going to come from these political designations, we could see through that and we can help people actually mobilize. So we've actually, been fighting 3 pieces of legislation where they've been taking, Black people off of elections boards over this past week. And one of the people they took off the board was Miss Helen Butler. If anyone knows anything about Georgia voting, they know Miss Helen Butler with the Coalition for the People's Agenda has really stood strong since Reverend Lowry passed away. And it's a lot of tactics going on. So I really hope that we can stay close to our South Georgia folk.
Another question for you, right? I'm policy. I love policy, right? There's another legislation that has been introduced to limit when, let's just say, a certain DA in a certain county wants to investigate a certain person who maybe used to be president. I don't know. Now they're trying to change the rules even on that to where she can't even do her job.
You know what? It's been so frustrating seeing how being in legislative session during this pandemic with a number of people who don't believe that it is real and who make a mockery of wearing masks and testing and trying to get the word out to people about legislation and policies, like you said, just like this, because now it's all live stream and videos and you kind of have to figure out which Zoom account that you're trying to be in. And then if you're watching as the public, they'll live stream it, but sometimes the live stream is down. So we've had a hard time even getting people in to testify against bills like these. And I'm not very hopeful about the way that the state of Georgia is getting public input on its policies right now. A lot of them are not evidence-based. A lot of them are conspiracy theories. And luckily, the federal government is kind of standing with us. We're praying that they will go ahead and sign the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, SR1, so that we can actually say to Georgia Republicans, legislators, conservatives, anti-voting rights people, suppressionists, whatever you want to call it, say to them, you can run your little games down here, but all of these federal, policies are stepping in front of those. So we've been pushing for the end of the filibuster up in DC and for them to vote on the Voting Rights Act.
Interestingly enough, one of the meetings I had last week was at the State House, and I met with Representative Tom Benton. And we could have not probably been any more different in philosophy, but one of the things I respected about him is he was still willing to hold a conversation and have the dialogue. And he left, and I left there, and he was like, my door is always open. If you want to talk, you're more than welcome to come in here and hold that conversation. Why is it that in politics, it seems like we talk over each other and not to each other anymore?
I think that it's really polarized right now. I'm a millennial. I'm 29 years old. So I'm growing up in this politics, as a little baby queer who's trying to make things a little more liberal, a little more radical. So sometimes my approach might not be the way to get people to lead beside me. But it definitely has been good to see that there are some folks with a backbone who can at least just hold a conversation. I do not have anything positive to say about that representative. I've been trying to, stand up for Dr. King's legacy. When his 50th anniversary came up, I put a piece of legislation out there to commend him and to give to his family. And that representative was one of many who said, no, thank you, girl. I don't plan on signing that. He was also one of those members who, when we had pins and ribbons on the floor for Ahmaud Arbery just 3 days ago, was like, I'm not going to wear that. So it's interesting that you had that conversation. I would say keep working that angle, whatever angle you can get, because that's not a revolving door for me just yet. But I do think that to the larger question around the polarization, hopefully there is some way that we can all get back to the facts. Because we're not at the facts right now.
Yeah, I actually have a question about that because I think that as of late, well, it's been going on for a long time, but we have seen it quicken, if you will. Policy currently has gone from just being about facts, to just being about what's best for the people, to these people are in these roles, just putting their personal opinions upon legislation. So you got legislation based upon personal opinions. So how? Like, for example, like for this representative who did not want to sign the bill that that is like, that represents so much, that is big, but it was his personal opinion. When we have to look at the bigger picture, we got to look at like what is good for the public. So when can we, or how can we get legislation back to what is good for the public and is not what I want to do as a person? You know what I mean?
For state level policy, I would say give yourself 4 years to work on a project. Just don't think about it as a one session thing. For the past 4 years, we've been working on getting an HIV pilot program here in Fulton County, where our diagnosis levels are really high, that of third world countries, as well as in North Georgia, where their diagnosis rates are really high because of injection drug use. So we've had to figure out creative ways to make state level policy still relevant to some of our different concerns locally. So I would say start with that, thinking about a really robust strategy of legislative support. We want at the end of the day, we want to know how much it's going to cost and where the money is going to come from. But before that, there's a lot of stakeholder buy-in that any organization, group, person wants to engage in before they really start thinking that this year they're going to get that law passed. I have been fighting to get a state roadway for General Larry Platt for the past 3 years, and I think this year is the first year that we are going to get it. General Larry Platt is really well known for being on American Idol with that song Pants on the Ground, looking like a fool with your pants on the ground. Okay, some people remember it. But he was more known for his activism because when he was 3 years old, he was shot in the eye by the KKK, and then he was run over by the KKK when he was on his bicycle at age 6. So he's been fighting visually impaired his whole life. And, it's really beautiful to finally not feel so frustrated that I couldn't get it done for him in that moment.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was my own fear, of his untimely passing or of him not being able to advocate with me one day, but he's still here, he's fighting. So I think we just have to think about it as a long game.
And I have one more question. Sorry. So you spoke about HIV for a second. Georgia is actually leading. Oh, well, not leading per se, but we're one of the top states in the United States for HIV. And I find it interesting that New York actually has a program to allow people who think that they might have been, who came in contact with HIV for a PEP, which is post-exposure prophylaxis. And Georgia doesn't have that, and you have to go through different means. You have to go through the actual providers themselves, such as like Gilead or what have you. And it would be nice to see that we have state funding for HIV, being that it's something that actually plagues Georgia so critically.
I agree with you. We have already talked to them about trying to expand our PrEP program for pre-exposure prophylaxis into a PEP program. So far, what we have heard is that they wanted to just filter in the $15 million into the ADAP program, which is a state aid drug assistance program. And it's fine, but we have to really talk about stigma when it comes to receiving, health sources like this. A lot of people are more comfortable with their community providers. And I believe this COVID-19 pandemic has shown that very clearly to any health professionals or government professionals who haven't believed that before. People are only willing to get whichever vaccine they might want to get in their community, knowing that other people have taken it in consultation with other folks. People were even concerned about what kind of COVID tests they would take, in through the nose, out through the mouth, round the back, in the corner. I mean, it's a lot going on. And so I think that these are opportunities for us to say, just like you said, well, what happens when you do start living with HIV? It's not a death sentence, but we definitely need more community support.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me ask you a question. Why I do have Deputy Chief Hamilton here, right? One of the things we talked about earlier before you got on was about bridging this gap between the community and law enforcement, right? There is a role that we know that the sheriff's office and the police department plays in it, right? They play a certain role, but at the same time, once again, they are per se employees of the state, per se, right? They get funding, they get money from you guys. What are some of the things that the state is doing to help bridge that gap and to help fund them to help build things like the PAL program they have in Cobb County? I'm sure that they can use a little bit more money. Can always use money.
That's true. I think putting a coin to it can kind of help it spin sometimes. So far, there has been a conversation at the state capitol about police department funding through their sheriff's offices, and it was really divisive. Larger context, people will say it's about defund the police. In my context, I say no, it's about appropriating. When I tried to put together, my HIV program, I wanted $400,000, but I had to be realistic. I could get 86, and so it's not me trying to defund HIV. That's just me really realistically working with the money that I have. So it was tricky to see that piece of legislation come through and say you can't lower your budgets more than 5%, when really over a rolling period, your budget could increase more than 5%. And then you could take away one, piece of a program. And in consultation with a lot of the sheriff's offices, they've said exactly what you said there. Fine. Everyone wants to argue about this thing, but we're really just trying to find community-sponsored programs and community-based situations where we could get real input. The only thing that I'm really have been interested in working on as it relates to law enforcement and the community has specifically been around Rayshard Brooks's life. I truly felt as though at that moment there was an opportunity when the Atlanta Police Department saw that the community was letting the MARTA buses go by the protests and letting them through, that APD should have used that as an opportunity instead of putting its officers on that bus and then driving them into the community to try to disperse the crowd. I think there's a lot of mistrust that's been going on, for years and years. But if we are investing in that real time, if APD had been able to have a direct action response unit where they really truly understand those principles of direct action, that people might go a little crazy, people might elevate their voices, you might hear that raw tone in people's voice when you feel like they're experiencing flight or fight, and you're able to say, okay, this is a crisis moment, maybe this isn't directed, right at me in this time. I think that there could have been some differences to go on there. So I've been trying to figure out, with the street racing issue that we have going on, a lot of the language has been really targeted in saying, well, we just need to find people if they promote it, and we need to find people if they attend it. I get that what we're trying to do is have no more deaths. One of our constituents, Miss Erica, she passed away on July 4th down on, in Sweet Auburn. She was attending a drag racing event. They bopped each other's cars and they started shooting. I mean, it just so happens that she's DC Young Fly's cousin. And so a lot of folks in the Atlanta community kept hearing about her experience. But really what we're trying to say is, well, where was the PSA campaign from the law enforcement that said, for real though, we're putting out warnings, or having some other savvy social media stuff to get that intel, to say, who are the key players? Who are the people who, if we're connecting this to drug issues or to trafficking issues, who are those people? How do we target them? But still allow for Black culture. Like, Black culture in COVID-19 is wanting to come out. And a lot of that has been through car enthusiasm. So I'd like to work with you. I really would.
Absolutely. Deputy Chief Hamilton, I want to bring you back into the conversation a little bit. Earlier today, we talked about just what Cobb County Police Department is doing. You guys have these different programs. What is it that you guys need, per se, from the community? How can the community help with you guys? I remember having a conversation with Colonel Atkins from Cobb Sheriff's Department, and we was talking about how we're going to try to build the bridge. Our organization is going to build the bridge between the county and law enforcement in Cobb County. He said, well, you know what? You ain't got to build the bridge. We'll bring the bridge to you. I just need you to help walk people across the bridge. And I had a conversation, believe it or not, with Paulding Sheriff's Office. Yeah. And he, white sheriff, but he said, listen, I've gone to the community. How do I get them to hear me when their distrust is so high against me? And that was an interesting fact, right? You said something earlier that really caught my attention. You said that I can accept hard questions. I'm willing to receive them and I'm willing to answer them, but you have to be ready enough to hear my hard response. What does that mean? Like, when you say that, what does that mean to the community?
Well, for instance, I know like I said, I know there are a lot of emotions high, based off a lot of things that have occurred around the country. I mean, what happened in Minneapolis and what happened in Louisville and what happened, in other parts of the country. But what I try to tell people is, like I put it this way, like I talk to my white counterparts, right? And I'm in I used to think it was a burden, but now I look at it as a blessing because I get it from both angles. Because I'm a Black man in this country and who's raising a Black son and daughters, right? But I'm also one of the Black leaders of Cobb County, of police department. So I'm getting it from the citizens, and I'm getting it from my family and my friends, my peers, and I'm getting it from my law enforcement families. Right. So I'm having to try to bring the message to both sides, which I think actually is why God put me in this position. So when you ask what can the citizens do for us, one thing is, if we're trying to reach out and extend, like for instance, we have a citizen police academy. Man, you can come and join the police. Well, not join the police, but you can come to this academy. It's I think it's 3 or 4 week program, and where you come in and you can actually see what we do as an agency. You go through all the different units. You actually go to the range and shoot. We put you in a simulator, where you can go in and you're going to be put in a situation where you got to decide, do I shoot or not shoot? Wow. You would be amazed that when people come out of those judgmental shooting and they see that they only have like less than a second to make a decision, and then you got people that's got several months to critique what you had to decide on in less than a second. Right. And it gives you a different perspective. So when you ask what can the community do, what I would like for them to do is to come in and let us show you what we do. Right. Come see our side of the house where you can get a better understanding. I would love to see our entire board of commissioners, even the court systems, all of them come through that judgmental shooting and just see what we see. So that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Maybe I can get Representative Park Kennedy to go down there with me.
Absolutely.
And we can go through this little training together and see. That's very interesting.
Yes.
So they're actually able to go to the gun range and go through a segment where they're presented with either the shoot or not. That would be probably very interesting.
We have some very good equipment that our BOC approved and bought, very expensive equipment that you can go in, and it's like the virtual, those virtual video games, kind of, so to speak, right? You go in, and then you're presented with a scenario, and then you got to make it decide. Okay, this guy got his hand behind his back. You asking him to let me see your hands, let me see your hands, and then all of a sudden he shoots that, and it's his wallet.
Right. Wow.
Okay? Do
Wow.
you shoot this guy? What did you think he had? Those type of scenarios. So it's very, very educational.
Really? And are you guys doing it? I know you guys just built a brand new center. You took the old Walmart off of East West Connecticut and built a brand new center.
OBJs.
Right. Is
Yes.
it OBJs? Are you guys doing that there? Or where, like,
Yes.
if a person wanted to sign up, where would they sign
Yeah,
up
they
at?
would call our training division, and you can go on the website and Cobb County Police Department and just pull up our training, and they'll provide the number and call and speak to the academy director. Now, of course, last year we didn't do it because of COVID,
Right.
but I think they're gonna try. We try to do at least 2 or 3 classes a year. I have not heard when that's gonna start back up, but they can at least call and go ahead and put their name on the list.
It'd be interesting to get some passes out of it too for the community as well. That'd be
Yes.
interesting as well. Darren,
Yeah,
what do you got?
I'm just enjoying the conversation, honestly. I asked my questions at the beginning to Deputy Sheriff, and I would like to ask her a question just to make sure that everybody's in part. So nice to meet you, first and foremost. It's good to meet you. I read up on you just a little bit briefly before I came here, and I'm really proud of what you've been doing. And we're like the same age, so it's real cool to see somebody doing so much, and I'm like, appalled. So
You guys on this side, y'all just blushing. Like,
Like,
because, like,
groupies.
they
So
like, she's like,
over
what I'm
here.
saying? She's our age. So it's like, that high up at our age, I'm still trying to like get over just being a business owner. So, so yeah, definitely. I would say, what inspired you to become in politics? What inspired you mostly?
I was really frustrated. I was mad, and I channeled that energy into a grassroots campaign. I was literally 24 years old. I was
right.
working at a healthcare clinic. I just felt like everything was happening around me, and felt people were talking about the things that we were doing, but wasn't putting resources towards it. So a special election came open. I considered running, put together a campaign. So this day, today I've written a book about running for office. I want more young people to do it. It barely pays anything, so you might as well, while we're already young and kind of trying to get it, have your small business, have your, steady people who will knock doors with you, who will call for you, get that early money in. Don't worry about if it's $5. That covers a yard sign with a union bug. So you just kind of have to get a little scrappy, I think, with this idea that whatever you're frustrated about, you can make a change on. I want more people to look for special elections. I want more mentoring in running for office. Like, how amazing would it be if you graduated high school and then one of your mentors helped you run for school board? Well, then you could address your sexual ed policies, and we don't even have to talk about access to abortion, but we could be talking about access to abortion, and we could be talking about what reproductive health care services really people need to have. Right now in Georgia, they'll teach you about AIDS, but they don't teach you about HIV. But you can't get AIDS unless you have HIV.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I think my confidence definitely came from just trying to get out of the segregated community that we grew up in.
Yeah.
I was over there, and I just felt really hopeless as a young kid, and my melanin hit different because we were in South Georgia, and I was outside all day, and I was chunky, and I was still just like, something is better.
Yeah.
And before we close out, I want to know, right? You're so enthusiastic. I felt in love with you at the town hall we had with Pastor Jamal Bryant. We had, I think at the time, Congressman Kwanzaa Hall on.
Ricky
You were
Brown.
one of the people on there. Ricky Brown was on there. Trinice hosted it.
Yep.
But what does the future look like for Park Cannon? Like, what is it are you planning on staying as state representative? Are you looking at higher places? What is the future hold for Park Cannon?
I love Georgia. I don't want to go nowhere. I do not believe that I will be in office forever, because I do believe in term limits. I want new ideas. That's why I brought mine to the table. But our whole slogan around me running for office is about the future. My logo is glasses because it says forward thinking, looking out for you, optimistic. Instead of like stars and stripes and like a capital flag or something political like that, we right now have to keep our eyes locked on
Right.
what we have to do.
Yeah.
I have 2 more years of this pilot program on HIV, and we have redistricting coming up in October. So I look forward to serving through my first time at redistricting, which will impact the state of Georgia for the next 10 years, as well as finishing out that HIV program. I know that someone's running for governor soon, so I'll be on that race, helping folks out, trying to flip our state even more by, age 30, which will be in a year and a half or so. I definitely want my business to be out and popping. So it's the future. I'm ready for it.
And just to remind people too, Monday, how can they help? What do we need to do on Monday? You said 10 a.m. people are meeting at the Capitol. So just give us more information about that so we can let everybody know and promote that, because I'm going to be out there 10 a.m. Monday. I can assure you that with my NAACP shirt I bought here in Cobb County.
Well, count me in.
We're going to be out there at 10 a.m. But what does the community need to know about that event?
This is a peaceful people's protest at the state capitol Monday morning at 10 a.m. That's when we gavel in, and that's when House Bill 531 is eligible to be called to be voted on at any time. What we want people to remember is that it might rain, so bring your gear and be ready to be outside if necessary. The location to be outside is called Liberty Plaza. It has a very interesting history. If you go to Liberty Plaza online, you'll be able to look up its history, but it's supposed to be designated as the free speech zone. So we really want to make it a place where legislators will be listening to their constituents and calling out, having coffee, reading the bills, preparing for session, and then going into session and remaining there all day. We would love for them to table the bill. We would love for them to postpone it to the next legislative day. And if that happens, then we'll need people to come back on Tuesday, because that's the last legislative day of the week. We will be out of session Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this coming week. So there will be no policies being voted on. But that upcoming Monday, March 8th, is the absolute last day for House Bill 531 to be stopped from getting passed. It's called crossover day, and every bill has to move from the House to the Senate or it'll die for session. And what we know is that even if House Bill 531 dies on crossover day on March 8th, which is when we are there until midnight, literally midnight, passing bills, it's also possible that bills that have already crossed over from the Senate will be amended, and that same language will be put into those bills. So we're asking people to stick around and pay attention until April 1st, when we'll probably be done with session, and that bill will get its another big run at getting passed.
So I'm going to end here, right? Last week, I had a great discussion with Judge Angela Brown and Fallon McClure, who's an attorney who works with, I think, Working Families of America.
Yes.
And one of the things that I thought was very interesting, she said that she was grateful that she was a solicitor, and then she was grateful that she was a defense attorney, because when she got into the work that she's currently doing, talking about policy, she was able to kind of see it from the perspective of both. And I want to encourage anybody that's out there. I don't care whether you have had a background, whether you have messed up in the past. If you have gotten your rights back, we need more Park Cannons out there. We need more Deputy Chief Hamiltons out here. There are options for you. Run for office. I mean, if you have your rights restored, run for office, because we need people who understand what it's like to go through certain things to express their opinion and express their voice. So we're just extremely grateful to you, Park Cannon. We are extremely grateful to you, Deputy Chief Hamilton, for being here, because you guys did not have to be here today. And we're just extremely grateful to you guys for being here. So kudos to both of you guys. And I know me and Park Cannon, we're working on some things with your team. We're going to get some things done. We're going to continue to go down to the Capitol and talk to people who we agree with and who we don't agree with. And I think that's what the dialogue has to happen. And we're going to teach people, irregardless of whether you like us or not, how do we talk to each other and not talk over each other. And I appreciate you for coming on the show today. I appreciate you, Deputy Chief Hamilton, with everything you guys have going on. I appreciate you. appreciate Trinice for coming back in today. You know, kudos to Trinice, and I appreciate Darren for coming on as well. We are just grateful to everybody. Everybody, please remember to go to our website and look up our website at www.blackpush.org. We have a Community Day event coming up where we're asking politicians from all of the counties in Georgia, as well as the community, to come on board, ask questions. There'll be police officers on there. We're going to get Deputy Chief Hamilton back. We're going to have the different DAs on there. We're going to have different state representatives on there. But it will be a conversation between us and the community, as well as different spiritual leaders will be a part of the conversation as well. And that date will be a broadcast on Monday, and we're going to start airing it all the way through. But it will be in the month of March, so everybody stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for joining in and watching. Thank you guys for everything that you guys do. And until next week, we'll see you guys again. And let's not forget that the only way we're going to do this is building better together. Y'all have a blessed day. Stay on for 1 second. Take us. We're off live. Thank you so much.